Well, good morning and welcome to the Ageless Wisdom Mystery School and our Wisdom of the Soul class. And we're going to continue with our suppositions this week. I have a handout that we started a couple of weeks ago as we discussed the wisdom traditions of the world and so-called perennialism, the perennial philosophy, also known as Prisca Theologia. So this is mysticism in general, and it's my attempt to aggregate a lot of schools that share these basic suppositions. So having listed many or most of those wisdom traditions, I thought that we would run down some of the, threads, so to speak, that unify them and connect them, or harmonize them, if not unify them. And we've gone through a couple of those, and today we'll continue with the whole idea of the mystic's path. What is the mystic's path? What was Christ perhaps referring to when he said, I am the way and the light? What is that about? Is it a how-to, a guide? How to grow, evolve, how to orient yourself spiritually and recognize the values and the ethics and implied or inherent in the wisdom tradition? Or is it more literally a connection between the material world and the ethereal domains, the spiritual domains, and maybe a both? Maybe a both. Remember, I'm always a little cautious about either ors. So a little of this, a little of that. We'll discuss that today. I want to remind you that we're on YouTube, posting the full video. Simply search Ageless Wisdom Mystery School. And if you'll subscribe, then you'll get a notice when new programs come up each week. Usually I post them by Monday or Tuesday at the latest. And appreciate you subscribing to the YouTube channel. And then there's also a podcast. Also, just search Ageless Wisdom Mystery School in your favorite podcast application or player or directory. And you'll find that there. Apple gives you an opportunity, Apple Podcast, to drop a review. There's another player called Podchaser that will accept reviews, and those are also very much appreciated. It's not just a matter of ego. It really drives keyword searches. So when you subscribe or when you click like or when you leave a comment, all of that impacts the algorithm of the particular podcast channel or the YouTube channel. So keyword search, we move up in keyword searches when you do that. And also if you share with a friend, that is really appreciated. So thank you for that. And let's, having said that, move into our opening meditation. What do you say? So get nice and comfortable in your chairs. Sit up straight, shoulders back. Maybe lift your chin just a little. Close your eyes and get a sense of being balanced and centered. Feeling the chair support you. Make sure your feet are flat on the floor. Don't cross your ankles or cross your legs. Feet flat on the floor. And feel grounded or connected. You might even want to stomp a little bit. Gently stomp the floor. And then imagine roots like electromagnetic lines of force that reach down through the floor into the earth. Even if you were in a tall building, it's easy to imagine that you're rooted or connected to the ground. Feel plugged in. It's real important that you be grounded when we do this kind of work, so it matters. Think of how a tree must feel to know that this is its spot, that it truly belongs here. right? This is where it grows. And at the top of your head, stand open and receptive to what you conceive to be a gentle precipitation downward of spiritual energy. Spirit, chi, ki, kundalini, prana, the life force, Luke, the force. So that we're sort of like a battery between earth and sky, between the material manifestation of the energy above. And by being connected to both earth and sky, like a battery being recharged, we are restored and renewed. Just allow yourself to imagine in that way, absorbing this energy. Consider that energy is more than your body burning calories. That there is a light, a color, a sound, a vibration that illumines and animates, a vivifying spirit, a life force that is variable from day to day, and the more anxious and nervous, stressed and apprehensive, the more frightened, the more sad, depressed, the more angry. It diminishes our light, don't you see? And so when you relax in this way, that resistance is lowered, and the flow is enhanced, and you become brighter, smarter, more insightful, more likely to understand and experience the goodness, the truth, and the beauty that perpetually underlies all experience in spite of its appearance. Remembering, especially when we move through difficult, challenging, or uncomfortable times, that all things pass, and there are better days ahead. Remind yourself of the truth of that, because it's so easy to forget. And let's take a couple of slow, deep breaths in your own time, in your own way. Just nice, big, full breath in. Hold for just a moment before you exhale slowly. Beyond where you'd normally stop, all the way out. Fully evacuate the lungs. Pause briefly and repeat that cycle. Big breath in, clean, fresh air. And as you exhale, you're releasing almost like black, oily smoke. Stress, tension, anxiety, worries and doubts, sadness and concern. Holding in strength as you inhale, feel the letting go as you exhale. Let's do one or two more. It's a wonderful feeling to breathe deeply. And then breathe normally. Allow your breathing to just happen by itself on autopilot. And take yourself to a place of perfect peace in your mind's eye. Imagine the most beautiful, peaceful, safe, and restful place that you can imagine. Maybe it's somewhere you've actually been, usually deep in nature, far from the roads and the cities. Or it could become completely fanciful. The combination of the elements that your intuition suggests to you spontaneously reflect your best sense of safety and peace, comfort, ease, grace, and even elegance. And without effort, just allow yourself to daydream, to imagine, wandering through this beautiful place. Allow my voice to go with you. And listen for the sounds of birds singing, or the other sounds of this place, like maybe gentle breezes in the tops of the tallest trees. Feel the warmth of the sun on your face and your arms, or if you're in a shady place, feel the coolness and the humidity of being in a shady forested place. Smell the fragrances of nature. And feel as if time stands still. That there's nowhere else you need to be, nowhere else you'd rather be. But right here, right now, in this beautiful place of perfect peace. And while your conscious mind, the tip of the iceberg, knows that you are imagining, the unconscious, 85 to 90% of consciousness, the unconscious, doesn't care either way, doesn't know the difference. And so too the brain. These are just electrical impulses, whether they come through physical sense and sensation or from your imagination. The brain doesn't care either. It's all the same to the brain. So you are, in fact, in a place of perfect peace. And find a spot. You'll come upon a spot. One particular place. It just is more beautiful here. It's more peaceful. It somehow feels like this is your spot. And you sit down here. Again, the feeling you're making this up is exactly the right feeling. Sit down in this place, maybe a grassy spot, maybe next to a little stream or a pond. And notice the sound of that stream spilling down the hillside, or if it's a little lake or a pond, you hear the very gentle lapping of the waves on the shoreline. And you relax even more. And feel the deep peace, as if everything is okay. I'd like you just to consider for a few moments that we're moving into what for many people is very stressful times. And it will affect their behavior and most likely your behavior and mine. It's a very important time to encourage ourselves to be conscious and aware of the impact of the stresses of this holiday. Not just the obvious stresses, the hustle and bustle of shopping, dealing with the traffic, so much to do. But holidays, especially at the end of the year where they're all clustered together, can be especially difficult times for those who are grieving some loss. Someone you love passed away. Someone you knew really well from work, or a neighbor down the street passed away, or an animal that you loved so dearly for so long passed over. And that comes to the front of the mind often during holidays and creates sometimes a kind of an empty space inside us. That's what loss is. But we can remind ourselves that in this physical world, this world of relativity, that loss is real. There is a real emptiness, triggered, amplified somewhat by the holidays and the busy, busy, stress. But on another level, there is no loss. On a more refined level, in terms of our expanded awareness or higher consciousness, loss is an illusion. One of the difficulties people have with grieving is a fear that if they heal, if they get better, if they move past the grief and the pain, they'll lose the love. And that's understandable, but it's not true. You'll lose the pain, you'll lose the suffering in time, but the love remains. Again, even the physical scientist, the empiricist, the one who has no interest in subtle energies or spirituality or studies of consciousness or any such thing, will tell you the basic law of conservation of energy. Energy cannot be created nor destroyed. Spirit is energy. It cannot be created nor destroyed. Spirit, energy, love, consciousness, love, awareness, consciousness cannot be destroyed. It's eternal and infinite. It has no beginning. It has no end. It impacts our emotions. Love is not an emotion. Again, even a routine psychologist will tell you love is not an emotion. They consider it to be a drive, a motivating force, but technically not an emotion. Though obviously love has qualities that impact us. Love can trigger stress, anxiety, anger, frustration, and hatred, just as easily as love can trigger joy and happiness and contentment and peace of mind. But love is eternal and infinite. And so everywhere you go, like a fish in water, that love is everywhere equally present. Your connection to all things, everywhere equally present. And I think that's what unifies all the holidays at the end of the year. Solstice. The birth of Christ was aligned with the winter solstice. deliberately. It appears Hanukkah also has been aligned with solstice because it's all about not only the hope and the promise of spring as the days begin to get longer and the nights shorter and the weather warmer and more hospitable. But isn't it about the coming of light? I am the way and the light. The light, the love, the spirit. It's like turn the corner at solstice and is coming home. And then even New Year's, all of these holidays. Are about the coming of light and the reason to celebrate that even our darkest hours will pass. Breathe into that. Take just one slow, deep breath, inhaling fully. Hold for just a moment and exhale into the truth that all things pass, that love is eternal. Love, light, consciousness, awareness, the truth, the wisdom, the peace, the joy of the season, happiness for no reason. Celebrate that. And bring that with you back to the waking state with a nice slow 3 count, which you don't have to do. But I think it's nice to transition by number 1, forming the intention to return to the waking state. 2, feel a rising, a gentle awakening as you wake up in the morning, naturally and normally, a floating up almost. And 3, eyes open, wide awake, back in the room, feeling fine, rested and refreshed and all supercharged and ready to rock and roll. Feeling better than before. Feeling better than before. Good. Welcome back. Okay. Let me bring up a screen share. I have several for us today. And with any luck, I think we can make this work. Let's see. I think this is the one I want. Oh, again, I'm getting all of these. Let me put this in front of the other 2. So, Melinda, can you confirm that this handout we've used in the last couple of weeks is on the screen?
I am seeing unity over dualism down to karma and reincarnation.
Yeah, and that's the only handout you see. That's the only graphic you see, right?
Correct.
Good. And that's where we left off. The bullet point, unity over dualism, known as Advaita. I think we touched on this at the end of the class last week. Advaita is a Sanskrit word meaning no second, not two. Advaita. So this is known in philosophy as non-duality. Very similar to panentheism, panpsychism, and monism, words that you see appearing just above at the very top here, which we talked about last week. This is what let me bring this down a little. This is what we talked about last week. The unified energy source of all things, spirit, that is ultimately eternal, infinite, unchanging, and self-shining. We talked about that. Both immanent and transcendent. The one in the many, this brings up Jung's collective unconscious. That's another idea that on some level, we're all plugged in together. Everything touches everything. Everything's connected. Panentheism, we've discussed. Panpsychism, we only touched on briefly. That's the idea that everything has a mind, that there is one mind that is undifferentiated. But every living thing, and many would say everything, rock, soil, river, sky, shares in that one mind. All right. Clearly, the plant kingdom has a mind, it's conscious, it responds to its environment. And the animal kingdom and its extension to human beings who are really part of the animal kingdom, but I would say evolving into its own kingdom. And I'm one who subscribes to the idea that there will be a kingdom emerging from that as evolution continues. It's something we rarely consider, that we're still evolving, right? It's not just the coronavirus that's evolving and mutating. Everything evolves and mutates and changes. You know, they want you to get a booster because the damn virus is changing. And a virus is not even a living thing until it comes into your body. It occupies this bizarre place between living and non-living. So everything evolves, everything changes, and above the human kingdom, many mystics talk about an emerging kingdom of conscious souls. Something I mentioned for your consideration. Wouldn't that be nice? Is it possible we're seeing a world that is getting tired of authoritarianism, fascism, neo-Nazis, cruelty, hatred, divisiveness, racism? Aren't we getting exhausted? I think so. And so perhaps we're standing at the verge of the emerging kingdom of conscious souls. And I'll leave it to you to think about what that means. And then there's monism, which we've contrasted with monotheism. So today, another one of these threads or principles that runs through mysticism and all of its various wisdom traditions is the idea of unity over dualism. And again, Advaita or non-duality is another way of referring to it. Now, to expand on that, I'll say, we have this next bullet point, love wisdom, sometimes called love truth in mysticism. It's hyphenated. Theosophists often will hyphenate love truth. They refer to it as second ray. And I haven't talked about the seven ray system of Alice Bailey in theosophy in general. But the first three, it's the idea that divinity emanates in seven different frequencies, just like white light is divided into seven colors, or an octave in music has seven notes and then repeats. So love wisdom is second ray. It is the consciousness, the awareness, the love, the wisdom, the truth that stands between spirit and matter, between energy and mass, between God and man, between heaven and earth. It's the path that we're talking about today, the mystic's path. So love wisdom is the path connecting man to God. An aspirational longing, sometimes known as divine homesickness, in the middle way. A few months back, we did a whole class on the middle way. You can search out if you missed it. The next thread, as we develop this idea a little bit, aspiring to embody virtue is a very central um, supposition or precept. Maybe it's best called a precept in mystical traditions, an attempt to be as much like divinity, God, the absolute, the Godhead, as possible, to be perfect, to be good, probably better said. And so a big part of that is nonviolence. When you consider the basic mystical idea that separation is an illusion, and everyone and everything in this seemingly separated, or this world of separated form, then violence upon another is violence upon yourself. For they are you and you are them in spirit. You see, in marriage, you learn soon enough in marriage that winning an argument is a very foolish strategy, because if either loses, the marriage suffers. So what is marriage if not a sacrifice of the separated self in favor of a union, or at least a harmony? We don't have to we don't have to agree. So harmony over conflict and cruelty and hostility and violence is a very important concept in the wisdom traditions. And we do this by means of compassion, and by the way, that includes self-compassion, kindness. I had kindness demonstrated to me as a child, but never taught to me. As an adult, I've reflected on why there isn't more in parenting and in schooling about simple kindness, just to be kind. And I'm sure there are some great teachers and great parents that do that. I don't want to use too broad a brush here, but my goodness, given the political landscape and the way mean, angry, cruel people, their hatred triggers in us hatred. And their anger triggers our anger. And it's very difficult to transcend that. That's a challenge for us. Because we can't wait for everybody to be kind to us before we choose to be kind to them. We have to learn throughout our lives to return cruelty and anger and hostility and all of its various forms, racism, sexism, all the phobias. When we encounter that, when it's directed at us, we got to learn to take the hit. Again, let it move through you and into the earth. Ground it. Let that energy pass through you. Be the lightning rod. Send it to the earth. Take a breath and respond with kindness, even if you're mocked for it. And that kindness doesn't have to be a big deal. It could simply be, I understand. I understand how you feel. And maybe in some cases, yeah, I can see how you'd feel that way. I think there's some merit to that. It's not my feeling, but... Or reportedly a phrase that Buddha often used, Shakyamuni Buddha, the Buddha Gautama Siddhartha Buddha from 2,500 years ago, is said to have used the phrase, that may be. When confronted, when challenged, when ridiculed, imagine being that cool. just to be able to say, yeah, well, that may be. That's pretty far out. That's a high level of conscious awareness that you have the comfort of your own personal truth and what you've come to realize, that you're not so easily disturbed by the cruelty directed at you by others. Beyond kindness, de-escalation. I think I've mentioned before in this class that for 3 years I taught a training on self-awareness that was commissioned by the Orange County Sheriff's Academy, the police academy in Anaheim. And once a month for 3 years, I'd go down there and teach the deputies and their whole staff, the men and women in the jails, not the inmates, but the deputies that worked in the jail, right out of the academy, the old-timers as well, the veterans, the sergeants and lieutenants, and the staff, like crime lab and forensics and those people all took this self-awareness training. I called it internal vigilance. In fact, my book, Fearless Intelligence, came out of that. I wanted to expand the concept of internal vigilance and self-awareness in law enforcement to the general population, and concepts that were way outside the purview of law enforcement. So that was also the genesis of the book Fearless Intelligence. But we worked on de-escalation, and one of the ways I talked about it is the difference between assertiveness and impulse control. In other words, when to step forward and assert your authority as a law enforcement officer in the field or in the jail, but also when to step back. And how to de-escalate instead of escalate a situation. And most importantly, how to recognize your emotional feelings such that you don't transfer them to others. So let's say, you have an officer who had an argument with his spouse and goes to work, and without realizing it, takes it out on this chump that rolled through a stop sign or some other violation, and it escalates. People don't like being pulled over by the cops, and sometimes in their anger and their anxiety, their fears, they get mouthy and say, why aren't you out capturing real criminals, and I pay your salary, and you're not going to write me a ticket for this, are you? And again, if because of the contagious nature of emotions, that triggers the officer. And if he's already having a bad day, that's how people get hurt. That's how people get shot, because their whole belt's just covered with weapons, from the authority of the badge and the uniform, to the ticket book, to the handcuff, to the baton, to fists. They're actually trained on how to beat people up. They're also given a scale, an ascending scale of violence. You don't reach immediately for the revolver, but they have the revolver and the bullets and the tasers and the mace and all of these weapons they're carrying on them at all times. That's pretty intimidating. Well, in our daily life and affairs, we can de-escalate. We can learn to de-escalate as well. Pick your battles. In my domestic counseling, couples counseling, I often see people arguing about the most trivial things. And what is also quite common is what started this argument, and each of them will say, well, I don't really remember. Well, then what are you arguing about? Well, I don't really remember, but he said, she said, and it's all about the symptoms. They're arguing about the inelegant way they had been arguing. It's like, take a breath. What's missing is the lack of good communication skills. I'm sure we'll do a class at some point on something I call the heart talk, which is difficult. It's simple, but it's difficult, but incredibly effective once you learn to do it. So let's see, de-escalation, nonviolence, of course, and forgiveness. That can be hard. But if you think about our unwillingness to forgive, the idea that I'm not going to let them get away with that, they have to apologize to me before I would even consider reconciling this relationship because they did this horrible thing to me. And I'm going to carry that pain and that hurt forever. Well, how does that hurt them? How do they suffer? The carrying a grudge, refusing to forgive, only you suffer. It's just absurd if you think about it. If you reflect on it for a minute, why would we do that? Attributed to Buddha is a story about the angry person. I don't know if this is really a true. Buddha never wrote anything down, just like Christ never wrote anything down. These are oral traditions that got written down hundreds of years later. But supposedly he said that anger and holding grudges and being slow to forgive or refusing to forgive is like an angry person that picks up a hot coal to throw at the other person in hopes that they hit them and burn them with the hot coal. But look who gets burned. the guy that picked up the hot coal. It's a good story, whoever thought it up. Unity, harmony, diversity. There's another trinity. Big on trinities. So the way, in this case, is the harmony between unity and diversity. And diversity often means conflict, but again, it can be seen as a richness, and that our lives are enhanced by diversity. I go right to food, right? Different food. Imagine if every restaurant had like an American menu. You'd want to go have some Chinese food, some Italian food, some Greek food, some Indian. Oh, we had Indian food the other day. It was delicious. I just love all the different spices and ways of preparing. And people dance in different ways. They pray in different ways. There's so many cultural differences that just because they're different doesn't mean they're in conflict. That's part of that either-or mentality that we talked about last week, the curse of binary dualism and false dichotomies. It should be a richness that we embrace. Next bullet point. This is big. Humans have an overshadowing soul. Beyond the indwelling soul, an aspect of self that's above and free of form. This is very, very, very central to mystical traditions, and it suggests that churches tend to, because they're human institutions and they have their own agendas, you see how corrupt many of them are. And I'm not talking about any one religion either. There's corruption in all human institutions. I could easily get off on a tangent on that. I'm trying not to. This idea of the oversoul is so central and so critical and denied by organized religions because they put themselves between you and the Godhead. So the only way to know God, to go to God, to harmonize yourself, to aspire to be more spiritual and enjoy more peace and happiness, more kindness, more prosperity, more love, truth, and wisdom, is to go through the church. When in fact, the church should serve man, humanity, men and women, so that they can serve their own oversoul, moving up to the unity of the Godhead. You see? But the church says, no, your soul is an indwelling thing, fashioned upon conception by God and tucked inside you someplace we don't know where. The mystic says, no. The physical body is an emanation of the soul above and free of form. And over the years that I've taught this and shared this, people are often blown away by the concept, my God, you mean my soul is already in heaven? What is all this original sin? And I'm a sinner and I'm a bad person and temptation. Well, yeah, the ego needs redemption. The animal body and the animal consciousness, that needs redemption, improvement, salvation, if you will, ascension, resurrection, moving on up like the Jeffersons, but not the soul. Soul's where it's always been. No beginning, no end. A matrix of organized energy, a spirit that lives in ashrams or houses of the holy, above and free of form. And this very class, this ongoing free class called the wisdom of the soul, is based on this idea that if there is an oversoul, we should be able to stand open and receptive, not only to divinity directly from the Godhead, but to the oversoul above and free of form. Is that not what our conscience is? A subtle, still, small voice that not only knows right from wrong and good from bad, but has answers to your problems, has insight and understanding to offer you. Where do you think those aha experiences come from? That illumination that arrives full blown and bursts into your awareness. You say, well, I don't know. I guess that came from the unconscious mind, which is full of garbage, but would that not also be the path into the conscious mind? I mean, it's only one mind. So the wisdom of the soul passes through the unconscious. But there's so much noise up there from the monkey mind and the persona and the ego, the jiva nature, the characters and the roles that we play, the stories that we tell ourselves and others about who we are, that you have to get really quiet to hear it. You have to meditate or contemplate to access your intuition, the voice of the soul, above and free of form. Now, with that, I'm going to see if I can bring up another screen share here. Give me just a minute. I think what I need to do is close this out. Okay, now you should be seeing through a graphic with three forms on it, two interlocking circles on the left.
Right, we got that.
The middle, thank you, Melinda, for that. The middle is represents a bar magnet, which I'll talk about in a minute. And the graphic on the right is a pendulum. These are basic forms that mystics have used from time out of mind to attempt to explain the relationship of the oversoul between spirit and matter, the consciousness aspect. And let's start with the two overlapping circles. I think this is fascinating. Sometimes, well, I was going to talk about the variations on that, but I want to do a better job of sticking to my main path here. The vesica piscis is a name for the overlapping, the union of these two sets. So the top circle would be spirit, the bottom circle would be matter. The top circle is God, the bottom circle is humanity and the creation of the universe. The overlap is the soul. Remember, Christ in the Bible is referred to as the Son of Man as many times, or actually I think more times, than he's referred to as the Son of God. For Christ represents the love, the center between the Father and the Mother aspect, or the Father and Holy Spirit. That's the Christos, that's the love, that's the Christ consciousness. So that's the overlap of these sets, both spirit and matter, both energy and mass. Vesica piscis means fish bladder. And I guess fish have a bladder that looks somewhat like that shape. But the fish itself looks like that shape. And if you were to carefully erase the top circle and the bottom circle, leaving only that oval in the middle, and maybe a little bit of the extension on one end, so it forms sort of a tail, you can see the fish that many Christians put on their automobiles, that fish shape. And I guess they believe it has something to do with the miracle of the fishes and the loaves, or maybe it's that several of the disciples were fishermen, or that Christ is a fisherman of souls, a shepherd to the sheep. But it's actually the vesica piscis. It represents both and denies either or, and denies separation. It makes everything true. There's a top circle, there's a bottom circle, but there's also an overlapping bothness to it. Now, the bar magnet has the same qualities. I'm going to come back with a different graphic, so let's skip over the bar magnet, other than to see in the third graphic on the right, the pendulum, which you could think of as the bar magnet beginning to swing. There's a great book by Umberto Eco called Foucault's Pendulum that goes into serious detail about the mystical implications of the pendulum. But, excuse me, but it begins with the idea that the top of the pendulum is a point. If you remember geometry from high school, a point, by definition, occupies no space. It's simply a location. So the top of the pendulum is fixed and unmoving, unmovable, perfectly still, actually beyond existence, for it takes up no space in theory. It's sort of like the imperative nature of the number zero. You got to have a zero. What does it mean? It took human beings a long time to figure out the imperative nature of having a null set, a zero. So zero, which means nothing in many contexts, also means everything, all that is, beyond the three dimensions of space and the fourth dimension of time. But extending from that point down to a weighted plumb at the end, and then setting that in motion, we get a pendulum that goes back and forth. It can also go around and around, which represents the ebb and flow of the physical world, the yin and the yang, the coming and the going, the dualism of the in-breath and the out-breath, the good and the bad, the male and the female gender, the polarities of the bar magnet. And you'll also notice if you move up the pendulum from the weighted plum, I know this is esoteric stuff, but if you like it, fine. If you don't relate to it, that's okay. I find this stuff really deeply fascinating, and it expands my understanding. To consider if you move up that string toward the fixed unmoving point from which everything is created or manifested, the path gets more and more narrow. The way gets straight. And there's less chaos and less disorganization and less madness and frustration in your life as you approach the perfect peace and the absolute stillness out of which everything that this pendulum represents comes. Now, where is my stop share? Okay, hold on. Let me quickly bring up the pendulum and then we'll go, or the bar magnet rather, and then we'll go to the Q&A. Bear with me. There it is. My eyes are such that I have to zoom in to see these controls, and it takes me a minute. All right. So, Mindy, do we now see the bar magnet?
I think we see everything, yeah. Top and bottom of the page.
Did you see that bar magnet says Father Spirit?
Yeah, and then on the bottom it says Mother Matter.
Okay. Father Spirit is causative. That's the only reason gender is overlaid. You might say, well, mystics often talk about God as Father, Mother, all that is, or God, Goddess, all that is. The idea that the source of all things is a man is a bit primitive, barbaric, prehistoric. So why would the ancients have done that, referred to the Father in heaven? Why would Christ talk about the Father? And then Mother Earth, Gaia, the Mother Matter at the other end of things, the receptive manifestation of the Father. Only because in nature, the male is assertive, causative, bright, colorful, going out to bring in the bacon, and the female is receptive. She is camouflaged. She is the nest keeper. She brings forth the life. She then nurtures that life, protects the children while dad's out gallivanting around. We see this in nature. These were the roles that humans played until 60 or 80 years ago. And now we're trying to do a better job of finding the balance of male and female energies within each of us. But beyond the positive and negative, the yin and the yang of the polarities of this bar magnet, the middle here is the whole magnetic field around it. That's what unifies what you might think of as opposites in the extreme ends of the poles. This is why the bar magnet is such a beautiful, mystical symbol. Because you have what seem to be opposite energies, but they're not opposing. They're more like two sides of the same thing, two sides of the same coin, two ends of the same bar magnet. But what unifies them is the middle, just like the overlapping, the vesica piscis of those two circles, don't you see? Or the string that connects the top of the pendulum with the bottom of the pendulum. That's the middle way. That's our topic for today. The mystic's path is all about the soul, above and free of form. Does it indwell? Yes, as a reflection of your oversoul already in heaven, you see. And so I put a big heart here and a big splashy bright star in the center. This is the sun, the soul, the consciousness aspect between spirit and matter. And so, again, I offer those to you just as a way of expanding your awareness and making it easier to consider that beyond the Trinity, which is where we started this class in February, and all of the different variations of that Trinity, the first three of the seven rays, the substantial primary rays of that seven ray system. I don't think we'll get to the other four anytime soon. It gets real esoteric to talk about the rest of the seven rays, but just to know the first three correspond to this Trinity. That the mystic's path, or when Christ says, I am the way, he's saying, I represent love, consciousness, wisdom, truth, awareness, between the Creator and its creation. And those are some graphics to help you comprehend that and work with that. So I'd love to go to some Q&A, some comments, some questions.
We have a couple.
Ready? Bring them on.
Fire away, so to speak.
Oh, you got a call on, Melinda. Who
Hannah,
do you want?
you're up, Hannah. Can't hear you. You're muted.
Okay, got it. I wasn't sure if you were referring to me or not. Okay, cool. Thanks, Michael. I have two questions. One of them is kind of like a logistical one, and the other is not. and neither of them really are too much on the topic. So I understand if you want to like save responding for a later time. But one is that I've heard you say lots of times, you'll say physical feelings and emotional feelings. And so does that mean that feelings and emotions are different things and not as interchangeable as I've been assuming them to be?
Yeah, it's a great question. That's a wonderful question. Thanks. It's a bit outside the topic today, but there's no reason we can't go there. It depends on who you ask, and I'm sorry if that sounds like a dodge. As far as I'm concerned, a feeling and an emotion are synonymous. Emotional feelings are feelings. I have seen writing articles where an attempt has been made to differentiate between an emotion and the way it is experienced in the body as a feeling. It didn't resonate with me. It didn't add to my understanding in any way. Much as psychologists will often attempt to distinguish between anxiety and fear, I don't see the point. They would argue that fear is of danger and anxiety is just something unknown. But both respond to understanding. Fear diminishes as you understand it. Anxiety diminishes as you understand it. So both are about what you don't know or understand, and whether dangerous or not. Similarly, I see no, personally, I've not heard a persuasive argument that there's a distinction between emotions and feelings. To me, an emotion is felt in the body. In fact, ancients always thought of, that's where this idea of the Trinity being mind, body, and soul comes from. Mind, body, and soul. Where's the emotions in that? Well, in the body. Ancients thought that emotions were like a variation on a physical feeling, and they didn't see them as aspects of mind. Today, we see emotions as an aspect of mentality, of mind. And that's why you have a physical doctor, a medical doctor for your physical body, and a mental health specialist, counselor, therapist for mental and emotional issues, but there are no emotional therapists, right? Emotional intelligence is a relatively new field. But yeah, um, I don't make a distinction. Physical feelings, pain and pleasure is felt in the body in different places, and so too emotional feelings are felt in the body. A feeling's a feeling. Yeah. And you had another?
I did, and this one came up for me during the meditation, so maybe it is a little more on topic. And so you were talking about, loss and, different people passing away basically or crossing over, and that there's no separation. And I, I agree with that very much so. But I'm curious about a different kind of loss that's like a loss of something that never transpired, that can tend to affect us almost on a molecular level and manifests in our day-to-day, going about the earth and how we respond to people, places, and things. So like, does that make sense? Like, if certain needs aren't met when we're growing up, and so there's some sort of loss.
Well,
And so, I mean, because I experienced the loss of that in a really similar way to somebody dying, right? So it things that left a void in us that are not as tangible as somebody physically passing away, you
I
know.
I hear you. I think I understand you. But can you lose something you never had?
No, but not having something can leave you with, I mean, you know me well enough. I mean, I could just give my own personal example, right? I don't have a foundation of feeling safe in the world. And that manifests in my life, feelings of fear and loss.
Yeah.
But it's almost like at a molecular level that I'm experiencing it. And so it has that sense of a void. So how do you fill that one?
It's semantic. Well, there's two questions. First, before I answer you about how, uh, let me just say I don't want to quibble over the semantics. I said that to you. I asked you, how can you lose something you never had, just to make a point. Watch your language and see if you can use that challenge. Yeah, how can I lose something I never had? But nevertheless, it is accurate to say I'm feeling a sense of loss because it's a need, a basic human need that children have that I never had filled or addressed in any healthy way. So I don't want to quibble about it. I just wanted to offer it to you as a way of finding the right way to frame it in your mind. My response to how do I do that is you become your own parent in a sense. If as children we didn't get the love, the acceptance, the safety, the security that we need to feel safe in the world, then our transition from dependent children to independent adults is going to be difficult. But as an adult, as we mature, we develop the ability, the understanding, the depth of intelligence, the character to address those needs. And it means we have to let go of the story, or at least rewrite the story, and not live out a tragic truth from childhood for the rest of our lives. To rewrite the story and say, yeah, this is true, and I can tell you all about it, and I've run it over in my mind 1,000,000 times, and I've suffered as a result. I'll jump to the last chapter. All love comes from God. All love comes from the universe. Love is the only thing that's real. Love is the only thing that exists. It's available to you. And there's a saying in psychology that it's never too late to have a happy childhood. It means we have to stand open and receptive to the love of the universe, the love that is the universe. Remember, the Bible does not say God loves you. It says God is love. That's very different. And so if all things are in the one, then all things are manifestations of love. Yet the dualism of the world says, yeah, look at all this light, but there's shadow over here, and look at all this warmth, but damn it, it's cold over here. And I'm living in a lot of cold darkness I'd like to have filled, and I never got it, so maybe I never will. And you don't have to keep telling yourself that same story. Yes, I never got it, but the new story is I'm learning to get it by standing in the light and in the warmth and in the safety and security of knowing that I'm part of this oneness of the universe, and I'm okay exactly as I am. And though I had that need as a child, I'm learning to transcend that need as an adult. Supply it for yourself, be your own parent, or let divinity be the parent that here and now in the eternal unfolding of the present moment fills you and your heart and your mind with that love that you described as lost, but which you never got in adequate, sufficient amounts. Best I can do in 5 minutes. Does that help?
Not so much. It's a little bit cerebral, to tell you the truth. And I think it might be because I'm not framing my question right.
Well, I think for now, in this context, I'm happy to talk to you privately anytime you want about it.
No, I know. I think maybe a better way to say it is, how do you experience that oneness when something physical passes away? How do you experience that oneness when it's not something physical that's missing?
You relax, let go of your resistance, let go of everything. I read an article just this week. This guy said, spiritual growth is the easiest thing in the world. We make it hard. It's letting go. It's just letting go, letting go, letting go, letting go. Breathe, relax, let go. Drop the story. Ask yourself, why am I holding on to this? Why does it need to be true now? How am I contributing to my pain? How am I using it to validate my suffering? Why do I do that? It's not a character flaw, Hannah. It's not a weakness. It's an inevitable consequence of being in form. It's why Buddhism begins with life is suffering. We all go through this.
So I'll be the devil's advocate for one more sentence. How do you let go of something that you never had?
Oh, you're not letting go of something you never had. You're letting go of the symptom or the consequence or the story that you've told yourself. Because, again, the love that you never had, the acceptance, is perpetually and eternally available to you on a spiritual level. You exist. You are a manifestation of that love. You are the love you're looking for. Not only do you have the love you're looking for, you are that love. But you gotta let go of everything that is not love. Rumi says that very clearly. Ours is not to seek and find love, but to release everything that stands in its way. Beyond The stormy sky, no matter how cloudy, no matter how dark, above all of that, the sun is shining. It's always there. Even at midnight, the sun continues to shine. It's always there. Ponder it. We'll revisit it if you want.
And that's our life's work.
Yeah, that's the whole point of it. Exactly.
Not easy.
Our job is to redeem fear and a lack of understanding with love and truth, love and understanding.
Jack does have a comment or question. Go ahead, Jack.
Yes, I wanted to say that both the West and the East have very profound mystical traditions. But in the West, and more particularly the Western Church, as opposed to like Eastern Orthodox, which is a little more open to mystical tradition, there's been a suspicion about mystical experience and a suspicion about mystics, both in the Catholic Church and certainly in Protestant Church today. And I think both Catholic and Protestants have the same problem, is that they're afraid that if you have your own experience of God, you're not going to listen to them.
Right. You don't need them. Right.
You'll have an authority that goes beyond them, which is very problematic when you're trying to control things.
Right.
But I think the mystical reality is right there in their own most orthodox dogma that the Christ was fully human and fully divine. Now, which means that at least potentially being fully human is in no way an obstacle to experiencing the ultimate transcendent reality, to being the ultimate transcendent reality. So of course they will go and say, well, that was him. See how remarkable he is, and that this one person was so wonderful, but we're just miserable sinners. But he said that you shall do even greater things.
Yes.
He was passing it on.
Yes. He said
holding on to it.
These things I do, you can do and more.
Yes. So that mystical experience should be our right, but we're kind of not pointed toward it at all.
No.
You know, our whole culture entirely just recognizes our physical, emotional, human animal, and pretty much denies that there's anything else. And if there is anything else, maybe you can go to church on Sundays and you can pray to it, but not experience it as the depth of your being.
Well, I read once years ago, and I could never find it again. So now I'm beginning to wonder whether I actually read it or made it up. But my memory tells me that Pythagoras once wrote, "The number 2 is evil because it is not the number 1." In other words, if God is good and we're not God, we're the creation, not the creator, then we must inherently be bad and in need of redemption or improvement. And then this whole story about laying this on Eve.
Yeah.
And the snake, blaming the snake for tempting Eve. And then Eve turned and tempted Adam. And, you know, fundamentalists, they don't want you dancing. A lot of fundamentalist traditions, even in Buddhism, tell you that music is evil because it makes you feel good. Mormons can't drink hot coffee because there's something evil about a warm caffeinated beverage, so they all drink Diet Coke because they get their caffeine from a cold beverage, which is not evil. And ask one of them about it, and they'll change the subject. It's not supposed to be reasonable. So I've also thought it ironic that the more fundamental a Christian is, I suppose we could find this in the other religions too, Judaism and Islam as well. The more fundamental a Christian is, the more they talk about the Old Testament and the more they ignore the Sermon on the Mount and the Beatitudes. I want to post the 10 Commandments on the wall at the courthouse, but I don't hear fundamentalist televangelists talking about posting the Beatitudes.
God forbid.
Turn the other cheek, blessed are the meek, become like little children. Why don't we hear the more fundamental Christians seem to be, especially this white Christian nationalism, which is really a political movement disguised as a religion, the more likely they are to talk about the fire and brimstone, the wrathful God who smites you down, the God that hates, the God that's angry. I think I told the story on this class a few months ago about the Uber driver that was running this on me as we were going to the airport, rather long drive. And I was somewhat open and receptive. I was actually quite open and receptive to listening to her. And I said to her at one point, so God hates this and hates that, and God is angry? And she said, oh, yeah, definitely. He's right there in the Bible. She meant in the Old Testament, of course. And I said, well, isn't anger and hostility, isn't that hurt? Are you telling me God gets hurt? His feelings are hurt? It doesn't sound like much of a God. Can God be hurt? Fly off the handle? I mean, isn't that sort of creating God in your image? And for the rest of the ride to the airport, things got pretty quiet. I don't know that people just are so indoctrinated by these belief systems that they just don't question. But you're right. Mysticism is not about faith. It's about knowledge and direct experience.
Yeah.
Knowledge or gnosis, noetic. And that's there's even a reference somewhere in the Bible. I'm not that good really at quoting chapter and verse about I think it's the understanding that surpasseth all knowledge, or it may say knowledge that surpasseth all understanding. But the way I would say it is there is an understanding that surpasses knowledge. I love that Einstein quote, any fool can know things. The secret is to understand them. So faith is fine as far as it goes, but wouldn't it be better to have knowledge and then beyond the knowledge, a really deep and profound understanding of the knowledge that would enhance your faith? Because there'll always be stuff we don't know, right? That's very Socratic. Wisdom begins with looking at what you do not know and admitting how much you do not understand. That's wisdom. It's the fool who thinks he knows it all. Thanks, Jack. Anybody else?
Not that I see.
Well, it's perfect timing then.
Yes, I was quite inspired by your talk about returning anger with kindness, and that's going to be my challenge for the week going forward. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay, peoples, thank you all for being here very much. I so love this class and appreciate you coming here live whenever you can. Remember, we do have a special website you can send your friends to, wisdomofthesoul.school. No .com, no .org, no .net. It's wisdomofthesoul.school. And there's a video there and a coupon where you can sign up for the newsletter that all of you guys are already getting, I'm sure. So, namaste, aloha, salam, and if you'll unmute and share your farewell and your greetings, your hellos and goodbyes with your other associates here, I'd appreciate that. And thanks again for
Bye.
being here.
Bye,
Have a good
everyone.
one.
Thank you.
Good to see
Thanks,
everybody.
everybody.
Have a wonderful
Bye.
week.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh.